So we're rounding up measuring economic performance. Another way to measure the economic performance of a country is through the balance of payments. When we talk about the balance of payments, it's simply talking about the records of a country when compared in the transaction it does with the rest of the world. This is Libya as a country. Libya does transaction with other countries. So the record of this transaction is called the balance of payments. Do we get the balance of payment here? Balance of payments is the record of a country's transaction with the rest of the world. So Libya does transaction with Turkey, Spain, whichever countries it works with. So the record of that transaction is called the balance of payments. So there wouldn't be a record without the balance of trade. So balance of trade is the exchange of goods and services. So the monetary value of the exchange of goods and services is the balance of payments. Do you get it? Transaction occurs between countries. This transaction will be recorded. The record for these transactions is done in the balance of payments, current account. Do we get what balance of payments is here? There's balance of trade, which is export and import. The value of balance of the value of export, the value of import is recorded in the balance of payments. Do we get balance of payments now? That's why it is the record of a country's transaction like Libya with the rest of the world. Is it clear? So, the economic performance of a country can be measured based on the value of exports compared to imports. So we can measure the economic performance of a country based on what the country sells out and what it buys in. Do you understand? There's export, there's import. This is a transaction. The value is recorded in the balance of payment. So which means we can measure how well or how better an economy is compared to the other based on their exports or imports. So what is exports? Well, we call it export because we are selling to foreign customers. Goods that leave this country, that leaves the shore of this country to other countries are exports. So it means this country sells to foreign customers. So the value of what is being sold to foreign customers can be used to compare a country with the rest of the world. So for exports, goods and services sold to foreign customers, that is export. And for imports, goods and services purchased by domestic customers from foreign businesses. So these goods that we buy from outside of the country is called imports. Do we understand the difference between import and export here? So the difference between export and import is known through the balance of trade. So balance of trade is simply talking about what is being sold and what is being bought. Sold, export, bought, import. Do we get it? So from balance of trade, we have the balance of trade surplus and balance of trade deficit. Why do we call it balance of trade surplus? We call it balance of trade surplus because the export exceeds the import. That means export is greater than imports. So if a country does more export than what it imports, then the country is supposed to have a balance of trade surplus. But if a country's import is greater than the export, it means balance of trade deficit. Do we understand the difference here? There's balance of trade surplus, balance of trade deficit. It is balance of trade surplus because our export exceeds our imports. It is balance of trade deficit because our imports exceeds our exports. Do we get the 2 points here? Great. So a country with balance of trade surplus will be considered as a better performer compared to a country with balance of trade deficit. So when we have country A and country B, we can measure the performance of country A and country B based on their balance of trade, if they have a balance of trade surplus or deficit. So if country A has a balance of trade deficit and country B has a balance of trade surplus, it means country B is better than country A based on balance of payments. Is it clear? So, yes.
Is there any disadvantages?
There is. Both situations have advantages and disadvantages. Let me quickly talk about balance of trade surplus. If a country is having a balance of trade surplus, it means the country does more of exports than imports. The first problem about this is that it's going to bring about inflation. So because now we think about selling to foreign customers, the demand for our goods and services increases. Domestic consumers will not be able to get these goods because businesses here will prefer to sell abroad. Because selling abroad makes more than selling domestically. Do you get the point I'm making here? A country with a balance of trade surplus could also have a problem. One of the problems is inflation. A high demand for exports would mean that the inflation rate will increase for domestic consumers. So businesses, export businesses will prefer to sell outside than to sell within the economy. That's the first problem. Another problem about balance of trade surplus is that resources might be depleted. You can use up your resources. We produce. So if this country does a lot of exports, it means we are using our resources, we're using a lot of resources. These resources might finish because they are non-renewable resources. That's another problem about balance of trade surplus. Let me try to think about another one. The balance of trade surplus can also reduce the exchange rate. It means the value of your country, the value of your country's currency might fall. So one of the reasons why we could have a balance of trade surplus is because our exchange rate is less. The value of the dinars compared to the dollar is less. So that means the dollars has more value than the dinars. So if the dollar has more value than the dinars, it means few of dollars will buy more